But the bottom line is this: we have seen a surge in minors coming to the border over the last month. And the reason why there's a surge is because the message has gotten out that there's this new presidency, there's the new administration. And if you show up at the border with children, they're going to process you, they're going to admit you into the country, and they're going to say you need to show up for an asylum hearing that most don't even show up for. And that gets out. Now, trust me when I tell you, I feel tremendous compassion for these people. I understand what they are fleeing. I do. I also understand that the people that are bringing them here are horrible, evil human beings, these traffickers. They take advantage of them. They rape the women. Some of those people don't even make the journey. They charge them thousands of dollars. And by the way, these people lie. They go back and they say there's a new law in America. You can now get in, just bring a child. And we know this. And so when you allow a group to show up at the border and allow them in because they have children, you are basically creating an incentive to bring children on that dangerous journey. Now, what do you do with them when you're at the border? How do we know that that's really their parents and not some child that was brought along? How do you know all? You have to confirm all these things. We don't have a way to hold family units together. We can't rent some big hotel and put everybody in the same rooms. And you can't have a place where you have kids running around and adults running around and terrible things could happen. So you have to protect those children by putting them in a place. That's what the Trump administration tried to do, and they were roundly criticized for it. That's what the reality that the Biden administration is now facing. And my point is, when Trump did it, it was a humanitarian crisis. It was a human rights violation. But now that Biden's doing it, it will get very little attention. Certainly won't get the wall-to-wall coverage and the people camped out there every day with the news sticks. That's just true. It is absolutely true.
Well, we don't know that yet. Let's see what happens when that opens. I've already talked to some immigration rights advocates who are very upset at the prospect that the Biden administration may reopen that camp, and I would expect that we'll see protests. I would also note, though, that I think one of the things that angered so many people was the idea that the Trump administration lost track of children, lost track of who their parents were, and ended up separating children, not just in a family separation way, but in a way that the Biden administration is now forced to try to figure out how to reunite some of these kids with family members who they don't even know who they are at this point.
Well, but that's not a function. That's a function of two things. First of all, that's a function of parents or people claiming to be their parents. In most cases, they are their parents coming into the country, and then you can't find them. Because when an immigration authority is calling to partner you up with your children, those people aren't answering the phone. In some cases, it's the fact that a minor arrives at the border, and they're going to have to stay with an aunt and uncle, and those people have to be vetted. You have to vet who these people are. You can't just put them in the home of someone and suddenly terrible happens, and you're held responsible for it. Here's the bottom line. All of these things you're saying are the reason why this should not be incentivized. No country in the world, not even the richest, most powerful country in the world, can create a system in which thousands of people can show up at your border with children, and you have some orderly process by which they're allowed admission into the country without any prior approval. You just can't do it, and no other country tries. And we shouldn't either. It's inhumane.
Let's talk broadly about immigration reform. Is there any aspect of the plans that are starting to take root? Is there anything there that you would support? A pathway to citizenship for the 11 million undocumented folks in this country? Would you support something for them?
Well, I think here's the first thing I would say is Americans are having trouble before they can even return to the country. You're an American, you fly overseas. Before you can even come back, you have to take a COVID test. You have to go through hoops and hurdles to go out and to come back in. So right now, we're not even saying that we're not even allowing people to come in legally. How could you then have a process to encourage people to come in illegally?
Well, no, it's not encouraging. It's not encouraging them.
Absolutely.
In the sense that the way the rule is January 1st. If you're not here as of January 1st, you can apply for.
Well, that's okay. Now, but now you're talking about So you're asking about the legislation.
Yes. So
here's the bottom line. Number one is our number one focus now should be on getting through this pandemic and rebuilding our economy. That should be our number one priority. This is not. I don't think immigration reform at this moment is as important as it was in 2013 or at times in the past. Number two, and I've said this now over and over again since that experience in 2013, the only way that you have a chance to move forward on immigration reform is first and foremost, you have to prove to the American people that illegal immigration, unlawful immigration is under control. You cannot say that right now when we have a surge of illegal immigration on our borders, including children arriving. Number three, the number one priority of our immigration system is we have to have laws and they have to be enforced. And they are among the most generous laws on the planet. 1 million people a year are admitted into the United States legally every single year. We're proud of that, but that's the process. And that you're not going to enforce that process then you're not going to have a process. Mexico has immigration laws. Canada has immigration laws. Every country in the world has them. We need them as well. At some point, we have to modernize our legal immigration system. It is my view that a 21st century immigration system needs to be based more on what you're going to do when you come here for work than it simply is on how many family members you have living here. And then at some point, after you've done those two things, you will have to deal with the fact that you've got 10, 11, 12, I don't know what the number is now, millions of people in the country that have been here a long time, who are not dangerous criminals. And frankly, at this point, are not going to go back and may even own businesses. And you're going to have to find a way to incorporate them into American life. But if you don't do the other two things first, that 12 million will turn into 25 or 30 million, and we'll never get this problem solved.
But how many of those people have become the essential workers that we need so often? I mean, I think about, you say the pandemic is a reason not to move forward with immigration reform right now and to help those folks. I could make the argument that the pandemic is the reason why, because we've placed so much on them. They're working in fields and in packing plants and in places that have kept food on our tables at risk to their own lives. And should they not be able to try to come forward?
Yeah, but that's a different topic. If they're working in fields, then that calls for fixing our agriculture program, which I've put forward ideas on how to do it. Because a lot of those people would like to come here seasonally, work, go back home, come back again. The reason why they don't leave is because they're going to have trouble getting back in next year. If you have seasonal labor needs, or defined shortages in certain fields, then you modernize the system to make it possible for people to come here legally, go back legally, and come back again legally.
So is that something you could do soon, as opposed to waiting?
But that's not what they want. I understood, but that's not what they're proposing. They're proposing to do it all at once. And I'm telling you, if you do those things before you put in place the enforcement, and right now we don't have enforcement. They've suspended the wall. They told ICE to release people, to not prioritize for deportation certain people. When you do that, you're actually encouraging the people to come here illegally.
What about the Dreamers? How about the Dreamers? Can we finally take care of the Dreamers in a separate standalone bill?
Sure. And
you would support that?
But yeah, and that offer was made 3 years ago, I believe. In fact, President Trump made a very generous offer 3 years ago. He made a very generous offer, and it was turned down because they didn't just want the Dreamers. They also wanted their parents. And they also wanted them to then use their new status to be able to claim relatives to come in from abroad. They're the ones that are not willing to compromise on this, because the activist immigrant, not the immigrants, most immigrants simply want to be legalized or want a process to be legalized. But the activist elements and the left and the Democratic Party, they want it all. They want the whole thing. And that's where the problem becomes. If they were willing to do it in pieces, you could get a lot done.
Senator, I have to note that we passed a grim milestone with 500,000 deaths from COVID. The last question I'm going to ask you in this interview is this. Was that milestone... Did we have to reach that milestone? Did we have to have 500,000 deaths? Could there not have been more done earlier by the Trump administration to prevent us from reaching this number?
Well, I think you can ask that question of virtually anywhere in the world. Everyone who has struggled with it, certainly every open society. We're not China. We can't lock people in homes, entire blocks, or lie about the true numbers. We'll never know how many people really died in China or Russia or Iran or anywhere else. So that's one of the challenges. I think the second challenge that we face in this country, and in some ways it's sort of a sign of our advancement, is we do have a lot of people that survive into their 80s and 90s, but we know these folks are more vulnerable to this disease if they get it. Our life expectancy in that way is higher than some other countries we're being compared to. And that's been a challenge. Now, I think everyone would say, okay, if we could go back to March of last year, are there things we could have done differently? Certainly. I think there were things that everyone could have done differently. States could have done differently. I bet you in New York, Cuomo was looking at what he could have done differently instead of sending a bunch of people to die in nursing homes because he didn't want them in the hospitals. But I also think we have to look at some of the achievements. The world today, in this country, we have not one, but 2 vaccines developed in a record amount of time that by the middle part of this summer will allow this country to get back to some level of normalcy, but not face a total economic, societal collapse. I think in the midst of this, we also have to congratulate our first responders, our doctors, our nurses, who developed in real time therapeutic and treatment advances that have dramatically improved the chances of survival and improved the outcomes when people were hospitalized. And even now we are seeing a dramatic decline in the number of nursing home infections, which is going to result in less hospitalizations and less deaths. All of that achieved in something that and by the way, did all of that while we still don't know the origins of this virus, when it started, what patient zero was. If all of that information had been shared earlier, we could have had a vaccine even earlier.